Hello, welcome to the Squirrel Squadron. We're going to have some people joining and coming on in. I'll watch as that happens as we get going. But if you're here to learn about how to do road mapping without dates, you found the right place. If you were here to watch me do a TikTok dance, you're in the wrong place. So maybe I'll be on TikTok someday, but not quite yet. So while people are joining, I will tell you just a little bit about the Squirrel Squadron. This will also be recorded and here wherever you are. So wherever you're watching me and listening to my voice, this is a place you can come back. So if you need to disappear or your internet dies or your long lost uncle comes to the front door, don't worry. This will be here for you to look at later. You know what we forgot? Laura, my very helpful community manager, is watching and making sure everything's going. We forgot to do our little thing that goes at the bottom. Don't worry, I will describe a few recent events and things that are coming up on the Squirrel Squadron. Just to let you know what that's all about. The Squirrel Squadron, of course, is my community of tech and non-tech people learning from each other. That's the only community I know of with thousands of people all across the world who are not all in the same group. So not all CFOs, not all CEOs, not all CTOs, but executives learning from each other. And that's what we do here. So we're going to talk about these crazy ideas for building a roadmap for keeping track of what your tech team does without dates on it. So we'll explain what that is. I'll describe why that might be helpful and so on. There's more events coming up. So these are always free. They're every week. There isn't one next week because I might be traveling, but after that, we have one on negative space, which is very closely related. We might get into negative space today. By the way, while I'm doing this review, would you please just chat, put something in the comments or the chat or whatever it is that you have in front of you. Tell me what brought you here. What questions do you have? Because that's something that I can then work into what we talk about. But so we have that coming in a week. And then I forget what else is coming, but I do know that in early June, I'm keynoting at a conference in Belgium. So I'm going to have to learn French. Je ne parle beaucoup français. But conveniently, I have some artificial intelligence friends who can help me figure out some French. So if you'd like to come along to that, you can check out all of these at squirrelsquadron.com. Those are the free events that are coming up. I think the conference actually has a nominal fee, but that's because somebody else invited me to go speak there. My events that normally happen each week are always free. This is my way of giving back. That's why I have the squadron. And we have a fantastic community who are always discussing and talking on the forum. And I see we've got some more comments on one that I was writing earlier this week about name, image, and likeness. Which is a new thing that you can sell. So I could sell sort of the image of squirrel, and you could look at that, and you could have it on a box of cornflakes or something like that. Now, the reason that has a tech angle, the reason that's interesting, is that suddenly you can put these things in video games, for example. So they become a whole lot more valuable, and in fact, worth hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars to certain kinds of stars who manage not only to be athletes or famous people on whatever teleprograms people are famous on these days, but also to have TikTok and Instagram and Facebook. So there's this whole industry of people with huge amounts of influence. Anyway, so we're discussing that on the forum. We're discussing lots of other good things. We had a poll on for today's topic, so that was very interesting. Discussions every day, interesting topics, and that's free again on the forum through the Squirrel Squared website. Squirrel Squadron website. I've got to make sure I say my words correctly. Rafe says his development seems to go on and on and on and on. And the team hates to set dates, and this drives Rafe bananas, I'm sure. I know Rafe very well. So nice to see you here, Rafe. We're going to deal with some things that you can do about that, so that not only does your team manage to work to appropriate outcomes without feeling that they're under too much pressure, but also you know what the heck is going on, so it doesn't go on and on and on and on, which I know frustrates you. And when we worked together, we worked on some ways to do that. Holly says, the expectations of our C-suite are to have very exact delivery dates very far out prior to the team has started working. Fantastic. Okay, now what I need to find for you, and I'm not sure where I have it, but I need to find something called the tilted slider for you. So Holly, help me make sure that I show the tilted slider, because that's exactly what you're experiencing. And it's what leads people to want to have dates in the way that you're describing. There's some great things you can do using that model to then change people's desires by giving them what they are actually asking for, which is not dates, but giving them the control they're looking for without doing that. So Holly, help me remember that. Others, please continue to put notes in the chat. I can see those. I will respond to them as I just did for Holly and Rafe. And it's really great if you ask questions and debate with me as we go. I know Rafe and Holly are going to do that. They already know. I know they know where the chat is. And it would be great if more of you did that. If not, I might just finish early and go walk the dog, which is totally fine with me, but may not give you as much value as I would like to. So ask me questions, debate with me, bring things up as you go. Okay, so where I'm going to start is with some old friends, very, very old friends, that I learned about in school, but didn't really understand very well. You can hear from my accent that I went to school in a country other than Britain, where I live now, in the 600-year-old house behind me. When I went to school in that other country, I learned about some people who explored that country. Their names are Lewis and Clark. And Lewis and Clark, you may or may not know, but they're two explorers. And if you don't know them, you can think of Christopher Columbus. Who is it? Cook, who sailed around the world. I think I remember, and Magellan also. I'm forgetting who went around the world first. So those kinds of folks all got commissions from somebody who paid for their expeditions, paid for the boats, paid for the salted beef and the other things they needed to go on their missions. Just like Rafe is paying his developers, right? And he pays them a certain amount to do some work. And the people who sent them on the expeditions had a terrible problem that we don't have when we send people off on software expeditions. Their problem was that they didn't have a way to check in on what they were doing. Lewis and Clark couldn't get on their phones and send a message back as they were exploring the interior of what's now the United States. They were exploring essentially states like Missouri and Montana and North Dakota and places like that today. But then it was wild wilderness. No one knew what was there. And they didn't have cell phones. They didn't even have telegrams. There was nothing they could communicate back with. And so what you might think is just like in Holly's case, that somebody would say, boy, I better get more control. I better make sure I understand what these folks are doing. So what I want them to do is give me a very detailed list of where they're going to be on what day, and I want to make sure I understand how it works. Strangely, that's not what happened. So one thing, I'll put this in the forum after this. I'll do a follow-up post, but there's a really good website with a copy of Jefferson's instructions to Lewis and Clark. And he's saying, you know, gather 40 or so people, go out and inspect this and check out that and do the other thing. And nowhere in it is a schedule. There are no dates on this thing at all. And it makes lots of sense that there wouldn't be dates on this thing, because there was no way for Jefferson to know. It wasn't like they could phone him up and tell him where they were. But in fact, Lewis and Clark got all the way to the west coast of the United States, saw the Pacific Ocean, came all the way back, and gave Jefferson and the country lots of information about the territory that they explored. And the same thing happened with lots of other explorers. Some of them died, of course. Some of them, their expeditions failed, but they were able, if they were successful, to come back and give a report of what happened, even if they didn't get to wherever they were supposed to get to, which happened to lots of folks, Columbus included, right? He wasn't headed for Haiti. He was headed for India, and he didn't get there. Here's the point I'm making with this. It is possible to have meaningful feedback and meaningful results from someone who's doing something in an exploratory way, and that's crucial. I'm going to get more into that in a moment, if you don't have dates. And in fact, you get more out of them, which is why Rafe's team is saying, man, we don't like these dates. Boy, you know, it's really tough. You know, we don't like it. It doesn't work for us. We don't want to give you dates, Rafe. It's not because they're jerks. I mean, maybe they are. I don't know Rafe's team today. But I very much doubt, if they're around Rafe, that they're any kind of incompetent people or people who don't care. I expect they care a lot, just like Lewis and Clark cared an awful lot about exploring this territory, understanding where the borders were. This is the kind of thing they were checking out, is what actually had the United States purchased as part of a deal with France. And they cared a lot. It was very interesting to them. And it wasn't because they didn't want to get to the result that they didn't give dates. And even if they had had cell phones, I claim they would not have benefited in any way from having a series of dates or milestones or things that they were going to complete. If you want to take a more recent example where people did have better communications, think of the folks who climbed Mount Everest, right? Tenzing Norgay and Sir Edmund Hillary, who went up Everest. Well, they had radios and things, and they could radio back. And what they did not do, again, is to say, on this day, we're going to climb this mountain. There might have been a snowstorm. Okay, so what do you do in that circumstance? And how do you know which one you're in? I was doing this for a group of CTOs and CEOs this morning, and they asked me, how do we know in what cases we're in this exploratory state where this kind of stuff you're talking about makes sense, Squirrel? And how do you know about when we're in another state where it does actually make sense to track? So I'm going to describe that in a moment. Let me just look briefly at comments. Oh, here's Suzanne. Suzanne, you got in. I'm glad. Suggestions for how to coach a company to move from roadmap to roadmapping without dates. Top 3 tips. I don't know if I have 3 tips. Maybe I'll have 5. But Suzanne, bring me back to that at the end. I want to get through the material first. But make sure Suzanne and Holly are both going to keep me honest here and make sure that I cover their questions a little bit later on as it fits into my narrative. But let me start by trying to share something with you. What I'm going to share is very hard to pronounce, unfortunately, and that's not my fault. Here's a hint. If you want to invent something that's extremely useful and you want to give it a really catchy name so people will remember it and use it, and they'll come to live streams and they'll share it with other people, please do not name it in Welsh, because Welsh is terrifically difficult to pronounce. Let me show you this Welsh item, and then I will show you how to pronounce it. How do I share screen? There we go. Yeah, and I want to share screen. Let's see, and I want to share the right thing. This worked before. Talk amongst yourselves. Oh, I want to share a window. That's the right thing. There's the one I want to share. Hurrah. Now, cross your fingers, everybody. Oh, I have to give it permission for all kinds of things. How annoying. Okay, sorry. This worked when I tried it before, but it's not now. Please let me try a different thing. This will just require momentary juggling of the right permissions. Talk amongst yourselves for just a second while I struggle slightly. The vagaries of testing, I used to have a wonderful salesperson who was our sales director at the first company that I ever did technology in. And he would always say that if you were doing a demo to customers and everything worked perfectly, then they wouldn't believe that it was real software. So please believe me, this is actual software. And I'm going to share this picture. Does that work? Okay. I'm going to ask Laura to wave at me or shout in some way because she's monitoring. If you can't see that for any reason, please. Oh, she's giving me a thumbs up. Perfect. Whew, it works. All right. So this is something called the Cynefin framework. So everybody say that with me. Okay, I can't hear you, but I'm going to trust that you're saying it correctly. Say Kevin and put a N in the middle. Cynefin. All right. Now you know Welsh. And this is due to a very clever guy called Dave Snowden, who came up with this while he was working as a consultant at IBM, and he saw many common patterns, and he's developed a lot since this. He keeps changing names of things and shifting this around, and I think he has new regions and other cool things. I'm going to give you the simple, easy, uncomplicated version of the Cynefin framework. I'm going to ignore, for example, the section in the middle here. He's got, Snowden has got these 4 categories. Why they're in quadrants, you have to ask him. I'm not sure. But what you have is 4 different modes of operation, 4 different situations you can be in, 4 different senses that you can be operating in. And I'm going to describe them in terms of travel, in terms of transportation elements, items, vehicles, because that's a thing that's familiar to all of us. And you'll see that if I describe it in that way, you'll be able to understand sort of what situation you might be in with your software that's like these vehicles. Let me start with the first one. So in this lower right quadrant, I always call it simple. He calls it clear here. In that quadrant, you're operating something that's like my car. And when I go get in my car, I do not know what my car does to go. I think there's a battery inside. It's an electric vehicle. And I don't know if it's in the front or the back. I don't know how the battery is connected to the wheels. And I don't need to know. All I need to know is that if I push this button and turn this wheel and push these pedals, the car will go somewhere. And that's all I need to understand. And you could imagine pieces of software that are like that. Chrome and StreamYard that I'm working with really should be that simple. Of course, things that are simple sometimes slip over into being complicated, as we just saw. But I really don't need to know very much about how my voice is reaching you in order to be able to navigate to StreamYard.com and sort of set everything up and connect to you. And the good thing is, moving over into complicated, if it is too difficult for me, I can phone support. I can ask Laura to help me out. I can get someone who's an expert on these areas and help me out with getting a better camera or with getting better material. And that situation, that complicated environment in the upper right, that quadrant is like driving an F1 car, Formula One, right? So the ones that go around at 300 miles an hour or whatever they do these days. And if I were to have one of those in my drive instead of my car, I couldn't drive it. No hope, right? Because I don't know where the gear shift is. I don't know how the car works. There's nothing I understand about how to make that car go because it's not anything like a traditional car that you and I probably drive. But that's okay because I can hire Lewis Hamilton or Verstappen, or I'm probably going to get the names wrong because I don't follow this sport. But those experts are out there, and if I hire them, they can drive the car and take it wherever I need it to go, and probably very quickly. So that's the area of complicated situations, complicated tools, complicated senses of operation. Now, let me just carry on to the other two. Complex is where most software lives. And in the complex domain, you don't know what the rules are. In complicated, you could go look up a manual. Somebody has written down how the car works. I never looked at my car's manual. It's too simple. It's too obvious. It's too clear. I could read I could read an F1 manual and figure out how to drive it with a lot of effort. And in the complex world, that's like flying a new plane. I'm a test pilot. I'm flying a plane that has never left the wind tunnel before. And so there's no manual. There might be a few bits of documentation, a few bits from the people who made the plane, but it's not complete in any sense, and it's not right. You would kind of hope that the F1 car, somebody has tested that car and really understands how it goes before we try to drive it in a race. We're up in the test pilot, test pilots flying the plane in an environment where we've never flown it before. And so we could try different things. We turn the wheel this way and the thing turns to the right. Wait a minute, that's not right. We push the wheel forward and it goes up. Well, wait a minute, that's not right. We're going to be testing things and trying them out. That's why Rafe, for example, in his situation, has engineers who are saying, well, I don't know how hard this is, Rafe. I've never done this before, and no one in the world has, and there's no manual I can look at. Now, they're right about that, but there's still things that you can do in that environment to track what's going on, to be confident about what's happening, and to be really clear on the results. Now, I just want to say a brief thing about chaotic, which is not typically a situation that us engineers get into, that we get into with our software, but it is an important one to understand. In the chaotic domain, that's like an airplane in a tailspin, right? So it's just spinning around and around. There's no connection between what you do and what the outputs are. You just have to try stuff. And it's not like there's hidden rules somewhere that you can discover. You have no clue what those are. So in the chaotic domain, you really can't get hold of what's happening. That's where it's very, very difficult. Wouter says, Snowden would say they're not quadrants. I agree completely. But I'm going to keep them to quadrants. Guess what? Because I like it to stay simple. That's going to help me. So I'm going to try to give you a simple guide to these complicated and complex environments. Now, why did I go into all that detail? Why did I tell you about all this cool stuff? And what does it have to do with roadmaps and software? Well, the thing is that when my wife built her website, lisasquirrel.com, amazing website. My wife does amazing art history, which I don't understand at all, completely beyond me. And when she built her website, she worked with a designer who had a nice roadmap and had dates on it and knew how long it would take to create each page. Because guess what? They had made 100 or 1,000 or something websites before. Websites are something that we understand. They are in the complicated domain. My wife couldn't have created the website herself. She's not an HTML expert. She doesn't know how WordPress works, but she doesn't have to. She can hire an expert. If she needed to, she could learn, and then it would move into the clear or simple quadrant for her. And there are certainly things we can all do on websites to create, say, an Airtable or an Instagram account or something like that, which doesn't require any specialist knowledge whatsoever. Those are pieces of software that are operating in the simple or complicated quadrants. Most software that we're building, the reason that you guys are all here is because your software is not running that way. Your software is much more complicated. It is like the Louisiana Purchase. It's a wilderness out there full of Native Americans, full of bears, full of other things that you don't understand. They could be friendly, they could not be, but you don't know about them. And you have to go explore them to find out what's happening. That's what building most software is like. Now, the problem is that there's this trend, there's this desire that people have, and I'm coming to Suzanne's question in a minute. There's this desire that people have to move from the quadrant that they're in into an easier one that takes less effort. And so it's really tempting for you to think that whatever it is I'm building, whatever thing I'm doing, it can't be that complicated. It can't be that difficult. And so we should be able to give some dates. We should be able to make some estimates. We should be able to do something like that. The problem is that we actually can't. And it's realizing that, it's coming to terms with that, and then doing something different that is really the heart of what we're talking about here today. And what I'm going to explain to you is how I help teams to go from sort of believing that they're in the complicated domain to accepting that they're in the complex domain, running effective experiments, getting lots of feedback from them, and then getting those hidden rules understood, and then being able to move into complicated. And at that point, it's actually extremely profitable, because computers are very good at taking complicated things and making them simple once you know how. But you have to discover what the rules are. You have to discover, say in Rafe's case, what is it that people want to have to drive wonderful conversations in their meetings. I think that's what Rafe's doing these days. And if you want to do that, what rules do you need? What do you need in the software? That's the part that's tremendously difficult. That's the part that's complex. Once we understand what's needed for that, delivering it is actually complicated or even simple. And you just have to stop fooling yourself that the part you're doing is actually complicated when it's not. So I hope that helps with which situation you're in and how you might know where you are. If you look and you ask your engineers and you ask people in your domain and you say, has anyone ever done this before? You know, I have a client who just made a wonderful French translation of a video I made. It was one of these events, and had a video editor make it shorter and then translate by artificial intelligence into French, so it sounds like I'm speaking French. This is an amazing result. This is stupendous. Has anybody ever done this before? Well, not for at least up until the last few months. All right, this is very novel. This is very experimental, and nobody knows what the rules are. How long does it take? Can we do Chinese instead of French? Can we do long text? Can we do text that's complicated and abstruse? We don't know any of these questions. And because we don't know them, because when we ask and we say, does anyone done this before? Everyone tells us no one has done it before. Then we know we're in the complex domain. If we're able, after some searching around and investigation, to find some experts, then maybe we're in the complicated domain. So maybe we don't need these tools that I'm about to talk about roadmaps and without dates, and how to work in an accountable way without deadlines. Maybe we can do some deadlines, which is what my wife did with her website. But the odds are, when you go ask around, when you try to find out whether anybody else has done this, is there a rule book we can use for whatever software you're trying to build, you're going to find there isn't. And that's when these techniques come into play. So somebody was asking about that. I hope that I answered that question. If I didn't, please ask me more. Okay. Anybody lost so far? Please throw comments and questions in the chat. So far, I've basically told you that you're in trouble because you think you're in a complicated domain and you're trying to act as if there was a rule book, and you actually can't. And that means you have to get rid of your dates on your roadmaps. But I haven't told you what to do about that. Okay, I don't see any questions. So I'm going to move on. And I have to do a little magic here. It's a little more complicated and not as simple as I would have liked to get everything up here for you, but I'm working on that. And my very important question for all of you is, have any of you, and I want you to put it in the chat if you have any of you ever landed an airplane? So I'm going to give a moment for anybody to tell me, why, yes, Squirrel, I have landed an airplane. That happened to me today when I was doing this presentation. And so then I had to quickly get this person to help me draw these on the whiteboard. Today, I'm just going to use off-the-shelf material here. Here's very good pictures. There's, where's the one I want? Here's the one I want. Perfect. Okay. So these are pictures of something called the glide path or glide slope indicator, also called the instrument landing system. And if you have ever landed an airplane or flown a simulator, you know, you've downloaded Microsoft Flight Simulator or something like that. If you ever worked with anything to do with landing an airplane, you will have seen this kind of indicator. There's different types. This one's particularly easy for me to use for my illustrations here, for sharing in the way I'm doing. But there are lots of other ways that you can do this. What you're tracking, Suzanne says yes. She wishes. Welcher says no. Holly says no. Okay, that's fine. I'm going to show you what the one piece that you need to know in order to understand this concept of landing your airplane according to a glide path. So what this indicator shows, just pay attention to the horizontal line. That line could be high up, as it is right now. It could be low down toward the bottom of the circle, or it could be in the middle. If it's up toward the top, that means that you are going too high, that your airplane is headed for the runway, but it's not headed straight for the runway. It's headed to go too far, and it's going to hit the trees at the end of the runway. This is a bad thing. Don't do this. The guy who was telling me this morning said he was flying a glider. With a glider, you only have one shot. You can't get it wrong because you can't turn on the engine and go back up. You don't have that option. So it kind of mattered to him not to be too high. And this indicator was very helpful to him because it meant that he could push the stick forward. That's what you do when you want to go down. And he could go down further, and then he wouldn't be too high. And similarly, he was able to say, well, yeah, sometimes I was too low. I was going to go short of the runway. I was going to hit the road or the car park or something like that before I got to the runway. That's bad too. We want to be on the runway. And so when the line is farther down, you pull the stick back and you go up farther. Now, the most important thing about this, if you've ever flown any kind of flight simulator, or if you haven't, go try this. It's a lot of fun. Try it in a real plane if you want to, carefully with an instructor. But when you do it, one thing you will notice for sure is that the line never stays in the middle, which is where you want it, of course. You think you could just put it in the middle and it would stay there. But the annoying thing about landing an airplane is there's all these environmental factors. There's all these things that make it a complex environment to work in. There are updrafts and downdrafts and crosswinds and failures to estimate, and putting the landing gear affects how much the flaps work, and all kinds of other stuff happens that a human being can't incorporate in real time. But that's okay because we have this glide path indicator. What it's showing us is we're a little too high, we're a little too low. Okay, we're a little too high again. And so you're always constantly adjusting. If you want to think of a much simpler case, think of driving down the road. If you watch your hands, don't do this. Maybe have somebody else watch while somebody else is driving, because I want you watching the road. But as you're driving along, I'm even indicating it here as I show you. My hands are on the steering wheel. I don't just hold my hands like this, right? My hands go a little this and a little that, and a little this and a little that, because you're always adjusting to potholes, to unevenness in the road, rocks or other cars that are parked and other things like that. So you're always adjusting. The same thing is true even more so when you're landing an airplane, especially a glider, right? You can't go back around. So you have to make sure you get right on the path. As you go, you're averaging out to be on the path. But you're always a little high and a little low. Now, why do I tell you that? It's because when you are steering your technology team, exactly the same thing happens. And your technology team is operating in this complex environment. Guess what? It's not just your technology team. Your marketing team is probably operating in the same way. Your customer service team is probably operating in the same way. The environment for them is also changing a lot. But I'll stick to technology. Your technology team is exploring new territory. It's working on something that nobody has ever done before, and it's going to get hit by crosswinds. And so that's why when Rafe says, my God, why can't they just give me some dates? The team says, well, we don't know, Rafe, because we're not sure when we're going to get there. But what they can tell him is where they are today. And if you can work out some very good imperfect indicators, and I'll talk more about those later, if you can work out some good indicators that tell you I'm too high, I'm too low, I'm on track, oh, I'm getting a crosswind, other things are going on, that's the vertical line there too that tells you more about left and right positioning. If you can monitor those things as you go, then you get up to the minute information. Now, that's the real value of having a method of tracking, i.e. a roadmap, that gives you lots of information about where you are today without necessarily trying to predict the future into the long term in great detail. The kind of roadmap that I'm really troubled by is exactly the kind, excuse me, that someone was commenting. Where did he go? Holly was saying, thank you. Holly was saying, these very exact delivery dates very far out before the team has started working. When you get that kind of requirement, when you get that kind of push to work that way, the problem with that is that you couldn't do that with an airplane, and you can't do that in the complex environment of a software team or many other types of projects as well, with high variability, complicated environments. Nobody knows what the right way is. The only thing you can do is a series of experiments. And so what you do instead is you fill the need that the person is actually having. Now, what I want to do is just see if I can find something. I may not find it, so forgive me if I don't, because I didn't know this was going to come up. But let me just see if I can find my image, and I can't. Oh, how frustrating. Where can I go? Maybe I can go to the right place. Sorry, let me try just one more place. Let's see. Will it be here? Nope. Okay, I'm not going to find it quickly. But what I'll do is I'll put on the forum after this a picture of what's called the tilted slider. And if you don't see that or you just want to get it from me, please just write to me and I'll send you the picture. But I'll draw it on the screen for you. So I'll take away this sharing. Let's get rid of that. There we go. And I'm just going to draw it in the air here. You'll get the idea, I'm sure. The tilted slider goes. Oh, wait a minute. I just thought of one more place where it could be because I'd love to show you the picture. Let me just see if I can find it in one more place. It might be on here if I'm lucky. There it is. I found it. Oh, I almost did. There we go. I just had it. Come on. Open up. Okay, there it is. So all I need to do is figure out how to get that into Chrome. Let me just find that. Can I do that? Maybe I can. With a little luck, there it is. Hurrah. Okay, so now I just need to share it with you. Apologies for the technical difficulties here, but I promise this will be worth it. So I want to share the screen, and I want to share that one. There we go. Hurrah. Okay. So this is a slider like you used to have on an old-time radio, and you just move this little indicator up and down, or left and right, but it's tilted for some reason. And it's, I'll explain the reason in a moment, but what it's moving between is at one end, super duper productivity, where your team doesn't worry about dates at all. They do whatever they can think of in the morning. They aren't accountable to anyone, but they can just go as fast as they can on any particular item. No sprints, no scrum, no testing, nothing. They're just at top speed. And you could think of a tiny little startup that might be building lots of software very fast, or a sales team that is just out there scrappily phoning every customer they can find. Those are examples of high productivity, but very low predictability, which is at the other end of the slider. And high predictability is somebody like NASA, whose developers produce 100 lines of code per developer per year, so extremely slow speeds of results, but very highly predictable, right? Because they have to launch the rocket at a particular time down to the millisecond, or Mars or Uranus or wherever they're going is not going to be there. So they have to make sure to be extremely predictable. Now, here's the problem that leads to the situation Holly is describing, and the reason that people resist and try to stay away from the complex domain and the elements that we're talking about that make sense in that domain. They resist that because of the desire for control. And that's the force of gravity that tends to pull your slider down toward predictability. Especially this does affect technology more than other environments. Technology is so mysterious and so out of control that very frequently folks like the folks Holly is working with tend to say, well, I don't understand this thing, but I do understand dates. So if I could just know that this would be finished by December, then I could go to sleep, I could deal with other things, I could work on something else, and I would just know Holly and her team, they're working toward completion in December. Can they just be predictable like that? Could they be complicated is really what they're asking. And the problem is you can't be complicated. So that desire to push the slider down is frustrated by actual reality, by physics, by the limits of human knowledge. And that's where the conflict, that's where the difficulty comes in operating in a glide path style rather than a roadmap style, in operating to experiments rather than operating with dates and fixed timelines. So Holly, I hope that's helpful in sort of understanding how you get to your situation. But the really good news for Rafe and Holly and everybody else is that you can meet that desire for control. The force of gravity is valid. Rafe wants to know, what am I spending my money on? Why is this here? Holly's boss, or whoever it is who's asking, wants to know, are we going to get done by December? That's a good question. It's a valid question, but you can answer it in another way. So let me move on to saying more about how you do that. Let me show you something that Laura and I are working on. And this is actually in the marketing environment. So this is not in technology. There's technology elements to what I'm about to show you. But it is not, excuse me, it is not a problem that we're solving purely by technology. There's small amounts, but it's mainly simple technology. Oh, you're kidding me. It doesn't want to let me in. Let's see if I can get in there. Apologies. More technical difficulties. I really did have all this set up. And then I found that StreamYard didn't want to play ball. So let me get there. I have to sign in, then maybe it'll let me in. It's my own Trello board, so I should be able to get there. There we go. Okay, now let's try sharing it again. And what Laura and I are doing is, as we do more marketing for the Squirrel Squadron, and have events like this, and the CTO and CEO event that I had this morning, and other things like that we do to try to spread the word, get people involved, we're tracking the probes and safe to fail experiments that we're doing. And very proud of what Laura's done with this as my community manager to keep all this going. So thank you, Laura, for that. She's also blogging about this on a Substack, so you can find that. I'll include that in the forum post and so on after. But the point is that what we're tracking is not when we're going to get this stuff done, but we're tracking the different items that we're working on here. For example, we're tracking that we're going to run some live events. So talking to some interesting folks in Boston, in Stockholm, even in China, who want to have me come and speak or virtually speak or do something else like that. And what we don't know is how good are those? And a lot of you who've done marketing will know one of the biggest problems is attribution. Wait a minute. Is this working? Did this TV advert, did this phone call campaign, did this actually generate any sales? And in our case, of course, the measure is not sales, but how many people sign up, how many people get to know me, work on some of these ideas and help us spread them further. And as we're experiencing that, as we're working with it, we're setting ourselves targets. So we're saying things like, what are our imperfect indicators? Well, it's not the indicator that we actually held an event and everything was successful. What could we know in the short term after we do our experiment to know that actually this is good? Well, if somebody's willing to do an event and they're a credible source, then, hey, this idea might be a goer. This might work. And we're working on that with several different folks around the world to see if that's something that will give us that imperfect indication. That's because we're in the complex domain. We don't know what will attract executives who want to make more money from their technology and want to work with other execs just like you guys are. How do I find more of you? Well, nobody knows how to do that. Nobody built a community like this before, just like nobody built Rafe's conversation software. Nobody built whatever Holly's team is building. Nobody's done it before, and therefore we need to probe, sense, and respond. We need to experiment. Laura's been very kind. She's put our Substack link in the chat. So if you're looking for that, have a look there. Or if you're not sure, just ask me. We'll make sure to get you connected to that. Because we're doing this every week. We're making sure to do this in public so people can see how we're doing it in this environment so you can apply it in yours. Now, how is this a roadmap, you might say? Squirrel, wait a minute. This doesn't go out very far. If I were to go through each of these, you can see this time box for this one I just had on the screen. That's 2 weeks. We're trying for the next 2 weeks to see if there are people around the world who would be willing to hold an event with me and invite me there and talk to me about promoting it locally and all that stuff. That's not going very far. What are we going to be doing in December, right? Holly's folks are going to be asking, hey, wait a minute, you're just telling me what's happening right now. What's not here, and what we haven't captured yet, is a broader picture of where we're going. You could think of that as kind of the runway in the airplane landing analogy. So what we want to do is describe where it is that we're going, which is growth of the squadron to a certain number of people and so on, and getting exposure and getting more people excited about these ideas. And we could describe that better. So Laura, let's make sure we look for ways to do that as we're developing this so you can see what the long-term picture is and where we are trying to land. But what we're focused on is, are we making progress toward that outcome? And that's where you get the desire for control. So in Holly's case, for example, she's probably got some stakeholders and people who are funding whatever she's doing and working with her on her project. And they really want to know that she's not wasting her time, that they're not wasting their money, that it's an effective outcome. And my question to Holly and to Rafe and to the others of you who are wondering about this is, could you gain their confidence and trust by showing them very frequent progress? So if you had time boxes that were short, experiments that had meaningful results with imperfect indicators like the ones I'm showing here. They don't have to be the final indicator. You don't need to know that you're on the runway. You don't need to know that you've actually released the fantastic transformational software for conversations that Rafe is working on. But you would like to know that you have the login screen. And then after that, you would like to see very quickly afterwards, you would like to see that the login screen leads you to the first conversation. And then that you can add a new conversation, and then that you can delete a conversation, and then you can invite someone to a meeting, and so on. All the pieces that you want to have happen. And if you see those things happening on a very regular cadence, and you see that the team is doing more and more experiments and has a very clear picture where they're headed, they say, we're going to be ready for this trade show to demonstrate this result and begin our sales process, for example. Then you can see that it's adding up, that it's working, and that it's coming to a conclusion. Let me do another analogy for you. And that is, if you've ever had someone do some building work, if they're building a house for you or a new extension or anything like that, they may have given you a rough timeline. You probably know that they don't keep to that timeline. At least any builders that I've had come and work on my 600-year-old house have never kept to any timeline that they ever gave me. But I do know what the milestones are. I know that they're going to build this wall, and then they're going to install these electrical cables, and then they're going to do the next piece and the next piece, and I can see it happening in front of me. And although it would be great if it were a complicated environment, you can bet building on a 600-year-old house is definitely a complex, not complicated thing. Nobody remembers how people built houses in 1450. You have to discover it. But as they're working, I can see that they're making steady progress. I can see where they're stuck. I can see where they're above or below on the glide path indicator. And that gives me enough confidence to keep giving them money. If they don't do anything and there's nothing appearing on the building work that they're supposed to be doing, and the wall's knocked down, but nothing has happened to replace it, I'm not going to give them more money. I have clear indication that they're not where they need to be. Now, this is a huge mindset shift. This is the sort of thing where you might need my help. You're welcome to get on the forum and ask me questions, to pick up the squirrel phone. My telephone number is on douglassquirrel.com. Happy to answer questions, discuss this with you, come and work with you if you'd like, although I'm not here to sell you anything. That's the place where you might need some help with the transformation of thinking across the business. But I can tell you that there's tremendous examples of people working this way. Somebody challenged me today and said, who really works this way? Who has this kind of vision? How are they doing it? And one good example is Pixar, who make amazing movies. Now, I don't know how they do it under Disney now, but certainly their method was not to say, we're going to have Toy Story finished by this date for certain, and we're going to have these scenes, and we're going to have Woody doing this, and we're going to have Buzz Lightyear doing that. They did not do those things. What they did is they said, we're aiming for Christmas. We're looking to have a very compelling story, and so far we have the first third. And we're now working on the next bit, but we're kind of stuck because we can't figure out how to get the hero out of the mess that we've got him in, and we're having to rework that. That is a way of having tremendous confidence that you're making progress toward an outcome without having this kind of minute-by-minute, play-by-play information like Holly was describing. So I hope this is helpful so far. Feel free to ask more questions. In particular, Holly, I hope I've addressed your questions, which were really great. And I've covered the topics that were interesting to you. I do want to come back to Suzanne, who asked, how do you help people to move in this direction? There's a couple of things, Suzanne. Let me suggest, first of all, that one of the things you can do is just to start working this way, and to start creating these probes, to create these experiments, and to start to emphasize and repeat and establish the principle that what you're going to be trying to do is do experiments which might have a positive result or a negative result. And both of those are good outcomes. So if you try a thing, if you say, okay, we're going to try using this type of prompt for people using the software more, or for them upgrading to a new version or something like that, that prompt might not work. Might be that nobody buys, nobody upgrades. But trying that in a cheap and simple way that allows you to find out whether people want that particular change, whether that's really effective at marketing or at sales or whatever it is you're trying to do, is a fantastic thing to do, not only to get the information, but to show people what is possible. And so what I'd encourage you to do first, Suzanne, if you want to do this with a team you're working with, I know you, I think, do some coaching with different teams, sort of like what I do. And if you want to try that, you could just do this under the radar. You don't have to tell anybody that you're doing it, but you could start doing some experiments and then start showing the results. We tried 4 things last week. Big boss, stakeholder, customer service, client, whoever it is that you're addressing. And 3 of them really sucked. And the client might be thinking, gosh, why did I pay Holly to do, or sorry, why did I pay Suzanne to do this? 3 things failed. You say, we're so glad that they were negative. Why are you glad? Well, I'm glad because they told us not to do 3 different types of approaches. And the 4th one was a great success. Let me show you this success. This really works. It gets people excited. It solves the problem. It really moves us forward toward the outcome that we're all working toward, which you remember is landing on this runway, getting to this outcome, building this piece of software. Now, if you do that you don't have to get anybody's permission usually to do that. If you do it a little quietly and in line with what the team is already working on, and you can start to shift the culture in that way. The other thing you can do is come clean and work with the rest of the organization to understand in what circumstances they have high predictability. If they have, in all other aspects of the business, very high predictability, they know exactly what the customers are going to demand. They know exactly when the features are going to be needed and when they can demonstrate them, and when they can sell them, and what the price will be. Then you're in an unusual situation. But almost always when I ask those questions, somebody says, well, we don't know the price yet because we don't know who's going to demand it. We don't know if we'll sell it in Europe or China. There's a lot of pieces we don't know. And I say, great, you don't know and we don't know. So why don't we be highly visible to you so you can see where we are on our glide path, on where we're getting to the outcome, just like you are. And then we can be much more flexible rather than being locked into a set of steps, something that we agreed months and months ago that isn't relevant anymore. We could be working together on experimenting and getting to a common outcome. Some people are responsive to that. Some people are not. Some people say, look, I just want this to be complicated. I want this to be something I can control. That's the important thing for me. And if they're trying to do that in a complex environment that actually does not match that approach, they're in trouble. So that's a place where maybe you should phone me. I can try to be helpful in bringing some reality to the situation. Or I might be able to help you to see that actually you are in a complicated environment. You are maybe even in a simple environment, and there are rules you can follow. Well, for pity's sake, let's follow them, right? I would not have counseled my wife when she wanted to build her website to go and get people who would implement a whole new HTML server, right? To build Internet Information Server or Apache or one of the tools that serves websites all from scratch. That would be ridiculous. We already have those things. And in fact, we got them so commoditized that we have WordPress and we have hosted sites and we have Wix and we have other things that will build a website for you. It would have been absurd to try to operate in a complex domain, to operate in a complicated domain as if it were complex. That's the less common situation. But when you ask those questions to try to determine which quadrant we're in, that's why I was mentioning that earlier on. When you place yourself in one of the quadrants, it gives you an awful lot of evidence and an awful lot of leverage for coming back to folks in the rest of the organization to say, hang on, what we're doing doesn't match the environment. It doesn't match the situation that we're actually in. So those are my 2 methods: under the radar and then demonstrating what the results are and why they're good. And the other one that Suzanne might want to try is demonstrating through questions what are the actual constraints, what are the situations, what are the positives and negatives, what experiments are going to work for us in this environment. Those kinds of conversations I find are very helpful. Feel free to ask lots more questions about that. I could say a lot more about having done this about 300 times. I've got plenty of examples to draw on if you would like more. So I'm going to stop for a moment and invite questions from you guys. We had some good topics early on here, and I think there's some more coming in. So please ask more questions. Argue with me and say, Squirrel, this would never fly at my organization because. I would like to hear that. So I'm going to give you a moment while I have a drink of water. Now, I'm not seeing any comments in the chat, so I'm going to assume that you're all either stunned into silence or I've amazed you with my stupendous ideas, and you're all going to rush off and implement a glide path mechanism in your technology team right away. If that's not true, please argue with me because we'll get more if you do. But let me finish with just one story and then an offer of something that I'd like to give you. The story is about a company called PerLego. And PerLego makes, Rafe says, both stunned into silence and ready to go do it. Okay, glad to hear it. But please ask more questions. Need to digest. Okay, I can understand that. There's a lot here. But this story is about this company called PerLego. which makes tools which help students get textbooks. So if you're looking for the right textbook for your class, you want to make sure you have the right version, the same one that matches the professor, that you get it at a good price, that it's available to you immediately. Students always leave things to the last minute. So Perlego helps solve this problem for professors too, of course, who also want to share the right reading, make sure the students show up prepared. So a frustration for Gautier, who was the CEO at Perlego when he came to me a couple of years ago, what a frustration for him was that the company was not doing any experiments. There was no new learning, and Gautier couldn't point to something and say, this sells more textbooks. This gets more people excited. This gets us onto more campuses. This is a positive imperfect indicator. This is showing you the right direction. And he said, Squirrel, I just can't get my team to do that. So by applying a bunch of these techniques, by using some of these ideas for tracking your work, for getting better progress visible, and making sure that people know what steps you're taking and how you're moving toward the runway that you want to be on, what happened for Perlego is that they began running 8 to 10 experiments every single week. So new probes, new things that went out into the world, tried a new thing, available to half the users or 10% of the users, lots of A/B testing and things of that kind. And so they shifted completely from, they used to have like 72-page documents describing everything that they were doing. They shifted completely away from that. And so now they had a one-page strategy description, which said, this is the runway we're headed for. This is the vision of where we're headed. And here are the experiments we're doing right now. And here are the indicators that you can look at right away. Now, they have an advantage over some of you. Their advantage is they've got lots of students. So lots of people are always going on and trying things. So they were able to do fairly easy experiments with a percentage of the users who came to their website. Some of you might have very low traffic environments in which it's harder to do experiments. Ask me questions if you're not sure how to do that. But it's entirely possible to do in that circumstance too. I've helped lots of companies with that. In their case, they could say, well, look, 10% of users are going to see the new splash screen, the new landing screen for our campaign for biology textbooks. And we're going to try that. We're going to see if that produces more results. And if it doesn't produce more results, we're going to try a different thing. But that'll be a successful experiment with a negative result. Just to give you another example, I have a client in insurance in Germany right now who has just been trying this with exactly this circumstance. That's what reminded me. They've been trying native ads. In other words, ads that they've paid for, and that they're not, it does say advertisement at the top, but it looks editorial. So it's in a magazine, in an online publication of some kind. And there's a bunch of blog posts, and then there's the thing that they bought, which says advert on the top. They're not lying. But it merges in with the content, and it is content. It has useful information about their insurance and how it works and how to select different types of insurance that is the type that they sell. And they've just been trying this, and they weren't sure how to get it going. So what we did is we attached a small group of engineers to the marketing team, and we said, engineers, you're going to be doing different stuff every week. You'll be trying a long native ad. You'll be trying a short native ad. You'll be trying a pay-per-click ad. When you search in Google for insurance in Germany, you're going to see an ad there. We're going to try all these different methods to see which ones work for the marketing team. They've been doing this for about a month, and they're having tremendous results. They've discovered that certain areas of the territory are terrible. Certain kinds of ads, certain kinds of locations where they put these up are just absolutely not working for them. And they're extremely happy because now they know not to do any more of that. And they found a few promising areas, and they need to double down and do more in those. But those experiments with a positive result, with a indication that is showing promise, they can do more experiments in that direction. And that's the principle that I want to commend to you. That's the idea that I hope you'll go and try yourselves. And I would love to hear how that works for you when you go off to your technology team, to your marketing team, to your customer service team, and you say, folks, we're like Lewis and Clark. We're going to go explore, and we know where we're going. We know the overall outcome, but we're not going to try to say, as Holly was summarizing for us, that on August the 12th, we're going to be at this river. On this date, we're going to have this feature released, and you can promise it to your customers, because we don't live in that environment. But what we are going to do is show you very frequent progress. We're going to make sure that you can see all the time, we're moving west, we're moving toward the airport, we're moving in the direction that you want to go for your software. And the indications are maybe positive or maybe negative. We're too high, we're too low, we're off from the runway, we're not doing what we want. And when we're doing that, we know how to correct. And we're going to show you how that works by having successful experiments with negative results. So that's what I've been describing to you. I'm going to pause one more second, have another drink of water, and invite you to ask more questions if you have them. And then I'll tell you a few ways that you can get more information. And I also want to offer you something. And I'll just remind you again, by the way, something else that you can do. Suzanne was asking for 3 tips. Here's another tip. Have people watch this video, and I have a bunch of others, which you can find on the forum and elsewhere, because there's more that I've talked about with this, and I'd love to talk to more people about it. So another way that you can introduce people to the idea that maybe this is a way they could build software is to have them look at more stuff by me, and they could look at this talk for this live stream, for example, which will always be right here. So you can always come back to YouTube or LinkedIn or wherever you are to see more of this. So I've mentioned a couple of times there's something I want to give you. I've written a 1-page summary of some of these techniques, particularly on the glide path indicator, the glide path method. And I'd love to send that to you. The way you'd get that is just send me a quick email, and you would find my email at, well, the place that's easiest to go is squirrelsquadron.com. So I'll just give you that one. There's also douglassquirrel.com, but I'm going to put this up on the screen because that's the easiest one, and it's the place where you can also get the follow-up forum post and lots of other material that I've written about this and about 100 different things. There's an archive of 2 or 3 years worth of these free events that you can get to there. So have a look at squirrelsquadron.com, get in touch with me, and I'd love to send you this 1-page document on the glide path. All this stuff is free, by the way. I'm not selling any of this stuff. I mean, you can hire me for things. I'm not trying to sell that to you. I really am not. The squadron is free. The material is free. The videos are free. These are things I want people to know about, because I'm frustrated hearing from people like Rafe and Holly all the time and watching them struggle and watching them get pulled down the tilted slider toward that predictability end where they don't have to be, because they're not NASA and they don't have to build software that way. And it's just a desire for control that you can meet in other ways. So I'd love to help you with that. Please feel free, head on over to squirrelsquadron.com. I'll send you the free material. And I would love to have you join the forum and the squadron as well. If you'd like to come back to more of these events, come to the forum and ask questions there so you can get more detail. Rafe has more to digest. He's already on the forum, so I know he's going to be asking me some questions about some tricky problems that we haven't covered here. So I'm looking forward to that discussion. Folks, this is wonderful. I had a very enjoyable time talking to you about this, and great questions and comments from everyone. And I hope you all have an absolutely fantastic day. I'll see you in 2 weeks for another event just like this one on negative space. All right. Have a wonderful day. Take care, folks. Thanks.